Don Taylor calls me and he says, Patty, I'd like to talk to someone, I'd like someone from the US and to come talk about instructional design. And I said, why the US? And he said, well, instructional design is more of a formal field in the US. And there are a lot of colleges where there's master's programs in instructional design. And some of what I'll be talking about today are competencies for instructional designers. Those come formally, but not just formally, from AECT and some of their organizations from the US. And he said, I think you could bring a little controversy to that. Sure, why not? Why not? And so we're going to talk about some of that. And so, what we talked about in some of our sessions this morning, do you think instructional design has a future? Do we need instructional designers? People can just learn on their own, can they not? They can and they do. So let's talk about, are we needed? Well, one of the things we like to talk about in our field is do we even need instructional design? And I think you'll recognize these folks, or at least some of them. Who do you recognize? Well, yes, you recognize me, because of course I'm going to take pictures of myself. Yes? Who else? Clark Quinn? That name doesn't sound familiar to me, so she's probably not in there. I don't think Cam, you know, she might be in there. There's
Harrison Ford.
Well, of course.
John Denver.
You're just saying that because I'm from Colorado. Here's Imogen Caseborn, and there's Nick Laycock, and we all sit around and we talk about, are we going to have jobs in a couple years? Actually, these are at some events that we've all been at, so I thought you might like to know that we've met in previous events. But here's a conversation that Clark Quinn started on Facebook just recently. And so I'd like to know what your opinion is of this. Litmus, an LMS vendor, started a contest, and here's the contest. Can you design, develop, publish a self-paced e-learning course in 7 days, given just a 25-page manual? Anyone done the same?
Yeah.
What do you think? In 5 minutes?
10.
10 minutes, okay.
Rubbish.
Right.
I must have thought it was that late tech.
Well, some of the answers are, Alison Rossett, some of you may have read some of her books. The government made me do it. Yes, and Clark Quinn says, this is the problem I rail against, order taking, having to write crappy courses in 5 minutes out of content. How do we even know this is even needed? What do you think? Any thoughts?
It was actually Clark Quinn's comment that I was agreeing with. He said at the end, it's just wrong in so many ways.
Right, it is wrong in so many ways, but should we do it? What do you think? Sometimes you don't have a choice. Who says, anybody disagree? You do have a choice?
There's always a choice.
Right, you can't.
Choice, but you don't get the vote.
Right, if you don't, you don't get the work. Right. So that's what one of the things we're talking about here today is should we be doing these sorts of things? Is this our work? Is this the work of an instructional designer? What would you say? You think not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you have to establish shadow, maybe if you have to establish something pre-developed.
Right. If you
Pages, I don't know.
pages and pages, probably not. If you have to just establish yourself, maybe you have to do this for a portfolio,
Yes.
but this is not maybe the work of an instructional designer. What does someone else say? Is this the work of an instructional designer to do this kind of work? Here, let me, passing out some cards here. Pick a card. I have a prize at the end from Colorado. Very important.
It's more like a cut and paste exercise, and you don't need any instructional design
Thank you.
expertise.
Okay.
in that.
If you got rid of the 7-day timescale, then possibly, because then you've got to feed into and design and develop what you actually want them to achieve at the outcome. But with that restriction, no.
Right. With the restriction, it's not necessarily the work of an instructional designer.
I would even say though, even if we take the time limit off, the fact that we're supposed to be focusing our design solely on this content is not instructional design.
Okay. You had something to add?
Yeah, there's nothing about how much content, the volume.
Well, and if you click on this, and if you want to see it's actually up now, litmus.com, and I'll be honest with you, the entire conversation is not up, okay? One of the things I said is, I think that Brent put it up there to get some, and Brent is a colleague of mine, someone I know. I think he put it up there to get some conversation going. Isn't this, remember this morning, the questions more important than the answers, right? This is a very good question. Should we be doing this? I loved it. I felt like it was pre-planned and preordained for my session. Of course, I put this up there beforehand, but I was thinking about it as he was talking. The question is more important than the answer. Should we be doing this work?
I think that we value our work as instructional learning designers because that suggests that anybody can make a fuss, and it's the same thing with the entire rapid thing.
Do you feel that way when you're working on some of this stuff?
Clients say, well, I can build this and articulate that, or I'm a learning designer. And that's like giving somebody a copy of Photoshop and assuming that they're a graphic designer.
That's right. And I've done some graphic manipulation in, I don't know, some easy tools. I'm not the least bit of a graphic designer. I'm an anti-graphic designer. But my graphic designer that I work with has taught me to do 3 or 4 things. I can make them look good. And someone just said, oh, that looks very nice. I'm not a graphic designer, but I can do 3 or 4 things. And I work in Storyline and various other tools. I'm an instructional designer, but if I did that, I think almost anyone could do it, you know, given some time. Pick a card. You can have those too if you want. Okay. So what's the question?
What is your take on what an instructional designer is?
I'm absolutely going to go there, promise, okay? So here's where we're going. So I can tell you where we're going so you can decide whether this is what you want to stay for. Number 1, we're going to get the answer to the question, is instructional design growing or shrinking? What do instructional designers do? Are those the right tasks? Do we actually have a profession? And I've got a definition of that. What do organizations really need from us? And I've got some answers that I think make sense, and we'll see if you agree with me. And I've got research to back that up. And what are our conclusions from this? So those are the things that I'm going to talk about. And by the way, if you want my slides after this, you can just email me and I'll send them to you. So happy to do that. And I don't know if the slides for everybody are available to everyone. If they're not, you're welcome to my slides. Okay, so is instructional design growing or shrinking? Projections of 10-year growth are very high. So that's good news. The sources were in September 2014 for some research I did. and they're very high. Funny you should ask. See if this works. I only did that because Americans are known for being ridiculously overly happy. For the most part, yeah. It depends what part of the country you're from, but absolutely, and you know why. Okay. Denver too. Okay, so we're gonna do some crowdsourced research here. What do instructional designers do? All right. If you've got something in your hands right at the moment, you might want to put it down because I'm going to ask you some questions. We're going to crowdsource some data here. How many of you do this? Needs analysis on a regular basis. Up, stand up. It's regular basis. You're doing needs analysis work. What's that look like to you guys? About 40%? What do you think?
More.
More than
I'd say
40,
more
50?
like 60.
60? Okay. All right. You can go ahead and sit down. Can somebody tell me what needs analysis looks like in your organization? Got a card? What's that?
What happens when you get a car?
I don't know. You have to participate to find out. You have to play to win.
We have a system we call performance consulting that's delivered by a UK guy called Nigel Harrison. I can recommend it highly. I don't get any commission. And it looks at the business need, the real business need, not presented need, through to the action plan, who's involved, what they can do, what they can't do, what the desired needs are. And that's the first part of the process. Yeah.
Okay, so looking at the real need,
yeah.
Right. So for instance, I was doing some work with a healthcare organization, and they said we need to revamp our training for customer service reps. And I said, why? They said, because they're getting the answers to questions wrong. And I said, how do you know that? And so it would be that sort of thing. And they said, well, because when they get the answer to a question wrong, we have to pay the person. Or in other words, let's say you call up and you say, do I have a benefit for orthotics for my shoes? And the person looks it up and they say, yes, you do. And they don't. We have to pay for that orthotic. And I said, well, how do you know it's a training problem? I mean, why is it a training problem? And they said, well, obviously it's a training problem. You have this, right? Okay? It's obviously a training problem if they were trained right. And I said, well, you're telling me when they look it up, it's wrong. How do you know that they were trained wrong? And so I sat with a number of people, and discovered that they were looking through 5 different systems and on a 14-inch CRT screen. You already know what the problem is, right? It was the 5 systems in the 14-inch screen, and there's just no way you can do something from 5 different screens. A human brain wasn't meant to do that. After doing this with 2 or 3 weeks of watching people work, and I said to them, is there any chance you're going to put these systems together in the next 5, 10 years? And they said, no, far too expensive, and it's 5 different systems that don't talk to each other. So what's the solution to that?
One system that does talk to itself.
What's that?
One system that does talk to itself.
Well, that's one solution, one system that talks to itself, but this is healthcare. Does healthcare have money? No, healthcare doesn't have money. Okay, so what's another solution? What's another possible solution?
You need a system to actually get in the way, and I guess that's something that we focus on our organisation. We're moving away from systems such as this, where actually what we're measuring is what's gone wrong. So let's measure failure, let's measure waste.
Right.
And once we know the system's thinking, like, one goes down the line, the same kind of concept. So actually getting the user in the way, understanding the true issue, what's the source,
Right. Right.
and then we go back to that.
Right. Okay. So in this system, the first thing they had to look up was the person's health number, and then they had to go to the second system, which is the health number tells you what their benefits are. This is a little bit different. This is U.S. And so what their benefits are. Once you know their benefits, then you have to look up whether orthotics, which are shoe inserts, are covered. Okay, and then you have to look up if they're diabetic, because they're only covered if they're diabetic, and that's in the fourth system. Okay, does anybody have a solution to this problem?
It's a process, but you need to change the process.
Couldn't do it. You have 5 systems you have to use to look up this information, and by the time you get to the fourth system, you have to still remember where you were in the first one. This is a super simple solution. What's that? Well, you could do that, but you could have also written. You've got the answer. Okay, I can tell.
This is England. No one wants to speak up, but there's a bigger screen as well.
That's it. That was the answer. Get them 2 video cards and a bit. Get them because that was the first question I asked. Can the computers that they have use 2 video cards? And the answer was yes. And I said, you can get them two small, 2 24-inch screens. That was it. We went down from a certain amount of error to almost no error. It's just user.
Just a question on this, because is that the role of an instructional designer?
Good question. Okay, we're not going to answer.
We do needs analysis in our organization.
Right. That was part of the needs analysis.
We do needs analysis. Initially, it's to tell people that actually they don't need training. Okay, we're trying to convince them that they don't.
Yes, and that's my question there, and we're going to get to that. Okay, we'll get to that whether that's an IDE thing, and we're getting there. We're going there. So part of my needs analysis was what is the performance problem and what would fix it, okay? Just for me, okay? All righty, so let's go to the next one. Do you do this? Meetings with SMEs. Stand up if you do. Subject matter experts. If I'm speaking Americanese and you need a translator, let me know. Okay, so we're talking 75%? Okay, all right. Okay. And when we meet with SMEs, what's the point? Why do we do that?
You try to extract from them the performance conditions and standards of the job.
The standards of the job and?
The conditions.
Okay.
It depends what sort of SME they are, whether they're a job holder or an instructor or an end user.
Okay.
Depends on their role.
Okay, so sometimes we're trying to get pick a card. The standards of the job. What's the most important skill of an instructional designer working with a subject matter expert? Patience. And what is the base skill of patience? Listening. Okay.
It's interviewing skills
Interviewing skills.
to actually find out more about the knowledge of the task. Or both.
Right. Interviewing skills, truly critical. Do we all have great interviewing skills? I don't have the best interviewing skills. I get irritated. I don't, I'm not the person you would send. I mean, every one of us doesn't have to have the exact same skills if we've got teams of people. So I'm not usually the person that's sent to get that information, but I'm very good at sitting with performers. I'm not the person that usually interviews SMEs, but I'm very good at performance analysis with sitting with workers. Very similar, but watching how they work and what isn't working. I'm very good at seeing what other people don't see. So,
I feel it also has to do with relationship building.
yes,
You need them.
you do need them.
It's not only about getting content or...
Right. And making sure they know they're needed. Yeah. The card?
Sometimes
Coaching, absolutely. What happens when you make a subject matter expert feel unneeded and unwanted and like they're a pain in the butt? Yeah, you don't get anything from them. You're welcome. Aces are worth 10 or 1, whatever you want. 11 or 1. Okay. All right, so this next skill. How many of you do storyboards? Let's stand up if you do them. %?
Yeah.
Okay. What's the most important skill in storyboarding? What's that? Say again? Oh, the structure? Yeah, that's a very important skill. And what else is really important in storyboarding?
Scenario thinking.
Yeah, so now what are you thinking? Very, very important. Scenario, yeah. And also, I've also used the question, so now what are you thinking? And what's next? And yeah, very much. Scenarios. Best person on scenarios is in the room, right here, Kathy Moore. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm embarrassing you. I'm easily embarrassed too, I'm sorry. What else with storyboards? What's that? Learning objectives and writing them well. I worked with a client recently who told me the learning objectives made her crazy. And then she decided to get a master's in instructional design. She said, oh, these are great. So that was very, very much fun for me. But actually, the whole project was wonderful. It was just she just thought it was very formulaic, and then I turned them around, and I didn't realize she wanted to learn how to write learning objectives, but she thought it was just an agonizing, and I shouldn't have put her through that. Sometimes you have to listen to what people aren't saying, and I didn't do a good job with that. So. All right, how many of you build e-learning, actually build the actual e-learning itself? Stand up. About 40%? Yeah. Yeah. Anybody think this is really fun? No? Was that a big no? Huh?
Depends on what you call you are. What are we talking about?
Exactly.
I'm talking mostly, well, I'm talking about anything that's asynchronous. No, not fun? I think it's, huh? I think it's great fun. This is the only part that, well, when you're never mind, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. Yeah, I was going to go there, but I'm not going there. Most important skill? Creativity? Perseverance. Yelling at the computer. Oh my goodness, yes. Oh my goodness, yes. Some design skills. If you don't have design skills, this is a nightmare. Visual? Oh, visual consistency. Yes, yes, absolutely. I used to work with one of my colleagues could tell whether things were 1 pixel off. And I used to want to kill him until I realized he was right. Yeah. Any of you like that? Who's it? Yeah. You're like that, huh? Yeah. And can you tell like from one screen to the next? He would just flip back and.
One browser to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. Hard. Yes, that's really hard. How about writing content? How many of you stand up if you write learning content? Okay, probably about half of you. Yeah. What's the most important skill? And I'm really picky about this one. What's the most important skill when writing learning content? Accuracy. Who said that?
The language of the learner.
The language of the learner. What do you mean by that?
Well, no point in talking highbrow.
Right,
English to
right.
someone.
There, right. Knowing how they need it to sound, and so it's not over their head
Or underneath it.
or underneath it. Good.
Or so it doesn't sound fakey like a clueless trainer wrote it.
Right. That's really true. What else? Logical. In their point of view, right? Relevant. Who said relevant?
Mine was the same about what's most essential and what you should keep out.
Right. How many times do we write too much? Most of the time? Would you say that we write too much most of the time? Okay. Clarity. Clarity is really, really important. How do you tell if it's clear?
Get others to read it.
Yeah. Well, get one of the audience members to read it and see if they understand it. And if you do that 90 times out of 100, you'll find it's not clear. Okay. What did I leave out in terms of major tasks? User testing, good. What's that?
Briefing external developers.
Right, briefing others.
Project management, making sure everybody does their bit.
Right. Managing the LMS. Oh, the fixing. Yeah, the fixing stuff. Oh, there's never any of that. How to implement? How it will be implemented, right? Course structure.
Actual timetabling of this before that lesson, the layer on and homework.
Right. Okay.
Ideally, evaluation.
We don't do any of that, do we? Yeah, right, yeah, right.
I mean, the other thing we do now, or we have to do, is market it as well. No good.
Explain.
We have to market and communicate.
Oh, market
communicate,
and communicate it. Right.
Sell.
Right, update it. There's a couple things. Toward Maturity did some really good research on what the learner thinks of our e-learning, and it's up on their website, Towards Maturity. Definitely read what they had to say, because the learners don't think much of what we do. And there's a lot for us to learn from what they have to say. They don't care as much about boring e-learning as we do. They do not. I've got a story for you. So my husband comes home from work one day, and I get a lot of my stories about e-learning from him. And he works in electronic defense, and he's an engineer. Do you like writing for engineers? You do? You do, okay, all right. Most people don't. Well, one story. He says to me, we do not allow anything that has audio. Our computers don't have any audio. The last 4 courses had only audio. It took me 6 times to get through the course. I'm really pissed off. And I'm thinking, why did they not know that they didn't have audio? He had to lip read until he could get through the course.
What did you say to him about lip reading?
I was just like, I said, how many people are in your location? He said, 6,000. I said, do any of them? He said, well, there's 2 or 3 computers that are in insecure, non-secure locations. You could go there and probably get a pair of headphones. He said, that would take me about 3 hours to arrange that. I don't have time for that. This is regulatory training. I'm not going to spend the time for that. Then you'll love this one. This is on security training, and this is something I would build. Find everything in this room that's insecure. Across of a building, and you go floor by floor looking for things that are insecure, and if you find them, a pop-up comes up to tell you this is insecure. How do you think an engineer is going to take that course? They're going to do a grid search for every time the mouse goes. They're not going to be looking for the things that are insecure in those rooms. They're going to do a grid search. Like that. They're not, all the time you spent making beautiful rooms, an engineer just wants to get through the darn course. And they're just going to do a grid search of your beautiful cross-section of a building with like this, looking for the cursor to turn into a. I said, you ruined my day. So that's how an engineer takes a safety course. Terrible man. So the other thing is the importance of audience analysis. And it's another thing that we often don't do, is who's taking the course and what do they want. And one of the things I got out of the Towards Maturity research was some of our audience does not care to be engaged. They want it over. That's all they want is over, especially if it's compliance training. And how many of you do the preponderance of what you do is compliance training? And ask your learners, how do you want this? And if you asked someone like my husband, he would say, over. I want it over. That's all he wants. Give it to me in as short a form as possible with questions at the end. That's all I want. I don't want it fun. I don't want it engaging. And and you also have to ask yourself, what is the objective? If the objective is CYA, you know what that means? Yeah. If that's all the objective is, then do we need to make it fun? If the objective is for them to actually remember it, then you do need to do something for them to remember it. But if the only objective is for a lawyer to sign off, perhaps we don't need to make it as fun as we do. And I thought that was incredibly interesting to me, that our learners don't necessarily want it to be as engaging as we do. Okay, so I'm going to give you a moment to read these 3 definitions of instructional design, and I'd like you to tell me which one's closest to yours. And this gets at, somebody asked me a question a moment ago. I think it was you.
see it a bit differently. Needs analysis and instructional designers are somewhat separate in the organisations we work with.
So those are
Instructional designers will always go back to the problem. They would be the analysts, the needs analysis.
So you have different people doing needs analysis than instructional design. Okay. And
So the whole process would be seen, the whole process. But instructional designers wouldn't necessarily do that.
okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would say what we think it should be, or what we think it is today. So I think that's probably slightly different thing as well.
Okay. So what we think it should be and what it is are different. And I'm getting to that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of getting to that momentarily. So how many would say A? You can raise your hand. Not what you, I'm asking what you think it should be. Okay? B? C? Okay. And I'm not going to tell you what it should be. I have my own feeling, and I'm going to tell you my feeling is C with most of you. And I'll explain why. Part of it is my own upbringing in terms of this field, and it's a performance analysis background. When I worked with that healthcare organization, I worked with Katika Roy there at Kaiser Permanente. One of the great things was this was one of the very first places that said yes when I said, before I even touch the training, I need to do an analysis of what the problem is. Most of the times you don't, and I'll be honest with you, it's easier when you come from the outside sometimes. But a lot of times people will say, no, we don't want that, we want training. And my answer is to anyone, if I can't do that, then I can't do my job, thank you. I just can't. I can give you the names of people who just design training. I'm not one of them. But I just can't. It's so much a part of who I am. So going forward with C as my answer, it doesn't have to be yours. And we can disagree, and it is fine. So the next question is instructional design a profession? Well, and I will just show you, you don't need to read this, just that the American Nurses Association has gone through this exact same process. Is nursing a profession? And they've done it very recently. This was 2010. And so let's go back to ours. Is instructional design a profession? And this 6 characteristics comes from professionalizing the audiovisual field. And they came up with these 6 characteristics. And I'm not saying these are the only characteristics, but when you look at the Nurses Association, it's almost identical. So let's look at this. A profession has an intellectual technique. It has an application of that technique, has a long period of training, whatever long means, longer than, say, 6 weeks, okay, or longer. You couldn't teach somebody it in a month or two. It has a professional association, okay, has enforced standards and a statement of ethics, and a body of intellectual theory that is developed by ongoing research. Are we a profession? Are we close to it? Because if we're not, the next question is, can other people in our workplace do this? Can we train them in a couple months to do our work? Well, so let's ask the question. What is it? I remember earlier on I said, what is it we do? And for some of the stuff we do, we said, yeah, SMEs could probably be trained to do this. So are we a profession? Do we do this? I'm not saying do you have to go to school to do this, because obviously you don't have to go, you don't have to have a master's or a PhD to do what we do. I mean, some of the best people I know don't.
I think we're missing the final 2 bullet points, in my opinion. Those are the weak points.
What would they be?
The enforced standards and statement of ethics, I'm unaware of
Oh,
anybody
okay.
having that.
Right.
And a body of intellectual theory developed by ongoing research. Certainly the research is ongoing, but a lot of people in instructional design don't have the time or the access to it, and we're just not up on it.
Right.
And that's something we can't keep just me in the 6-week.
Right. The theory, I mean, there is a body of research, and there is theory and research in our field, and you're saying, but most of us don't either have access to it or don't use it. Is that what you're saying?
That's my impression.
Okay.
So also go back to your point that you made right at the start about the difference between the US and the UK, but I think there's a lot more, when I speak to colleagues in the US part of their organisations, like I'm an instructional designer, that's what I've always done, that's what I do, and in the UK side of the organisation, it tends to be people from the business community back there all the time.
Although there's quite a few. Cami Bean wrote a great book called The Accidental Instructional Designer. Thank you. Yes. And I've heard that as well. Although the British Journal of Instructional Technology, and I'll be talking about that in a moment, agrees about the IBS-STIPI standards that I'm about to talk about what's needed to be an instructional designer. So there's a fair amount of worldwide agreement about the competencies, but again, any other thoughts about this? Are we a profession?
I would say that field systems are performance and profession, and that's why you can't be teaching people to do it necessarily. But part of our job, certainly part of our job as I see it, is to be a visionary and to lead the whole vision of that project. And if you can't do that, you can't be a competent instructional designer. And it's not something that you can necessarily teach people. You can certainly nurture it, but if that kind of artistic thing isn't in them in the first place, then you can't force it.
I think you're right. There is definitely some art to this. I've been known to say if I have to choose between an instructional designer and a graphic designer, give me the graphic designer because if it looks bad, it is bad. You know, and it's not necessarily so, but. Have you ever built out a project where the final thing just looks bad? You know, it's got to look good, you know? But you're right, it also has to be good, but graphics are incredibly important, and art is important, but it also has to be instructionally good. Any other thoughts about this? I don't have an answer to this. I don't know if we're a profession.
Surely this debate is in which professional good people can develop mastery in it. If you were at the top
Good
of the
point.
game,
Right.
I mean, I could do marketing and make me a top-end marketeer.
Right, that's true. I learned a lot about marketing working for a marketing company. I'm not a marketing expert by any means. That's great. Can you develop mastery at it? Are some people better at instructional design than others? Yes, absolutely, and we know who they are. You know, those are certain people that you ask the questions of. And I think that Kathy's bottom one, the intellectual theory and the ongoing research, but a lot of people are not interested in it. And there's an awful lot of myth in our field. Is there not? You still hear about learning styles? Oh my God, why? That's ridiculous. It's crazy. I gave a whole presentation on that one time, and someone came up to me at the end and said, I need to convince you otherwise. And I said, no, you don't. You know, I'll kill myself if you do. Okay, so here's the meat. Here's the meat, and here's where we may disagree. Is there a mismatch between today's jobs and what we're currently doing? And And I think a lot of the answers have already been answered this morning. So you already know how I feel about it. And I felt vindicated this morning because I feel there is a huge mismatch between today's jobs, not our jobs necessarily, but the jobs of today and what we're doing to support those jobs. And here's where I'm making my case, okay? I'm starting to make my case here. And I'm going to be giving you links so that you can follow this research yourself. It's not that what we do isn't good or isn't needed, it's just not enough. The share of routine jobs has been steadily decreasing since the 1980s. And the work that we do does not support the types of jobs that are now coming into the market. It doesn't support it enough. So I'm going to show you a couple of things. I'm going to spend more time with the OECD Skills Outlook 2013 because I think it's much more convincing. But the Accenture study that came out in 2014 says that more than 75% of manufacturers report a moderate to severe shortage of workers who can work in manufacturing companies, and that it's as people approach the retirement age, they are going to not be able to function in those companies because people cannot replace them. Yeah. Yeah, and the OECD study, which covered, 150,000 people, 24 countries, including the US and the UK, is startling. It covered people from ages 16 to 65, and it was done in 2011 and 2012. And I'll give you a moment to see where the middle is, the average. And they actually looked at people's skills to be able to support technology-enabled jobs. And you'll notice that UK is right here, and this is the United States. We're both below the line, below the average. Finland and Japan have the highest share of top performers in skill. These are skills to support technology-enabled jobs. And if you look at the top, you'll see this is level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, 5. This is proficiencies in skills. And so what we're looking at here, this is the center, right here. And we're looking at skills.
We can see what you're pointing at.
Oh, oh, great, that's great. Let me do an escape. And then you see nothing. Great, that's, all right. All right, then I'm going to explain it. Okay. Do you see that take a look at the average. That's where the blue band is in the middle. Okay, if you look underneath, 2 below is England and Northern Ireland, so that's UK. Okay, and if you look a little bit further down, you'll see the US. All right, so that's what I'm going to talk about because that's the bulk of the folks in the room. But you can, if you go to this PDF right here thank you so much, because otherwise it would be like, that idiot is talking, and there is nothing making sense. Okay, thank you. And if you look at each band, you'll see towards the left is the lowest performing band, and then you look to the right and it's the highest performing band in each country, okay? And so what they were looking at is skills in literacy, numeracy, and technology skills. And they were looking at, and if you want to read the study, it's very interesting, it's very easy to read. You can go to this PDF here, and it's the types of skills needed to support a technology literate workforce. And it's depressing as hell. Because what it says is that we do not, if you're below the line, we do not have adequate skills to support a technology literate workforce. Now, when we're looking at the medium blue and the dark blue, we have approximately 50% of our population able to do that, but it's not enough. So what do we get when we get those folks into our workforce? We get people that you and I need to support. Okay, that's all I'm going to spend on that, but that's the research showing us that we do not have people in our workforce that can do the jobs. Okay, so this is additional information for you that our skills, and this was supported this morning by our keynote speaker. On the left, and I just showed you that we need more people who can do non-routine skills. It's not that we don't have jobs that require some routine skills, but less and less of our skills in the workplace are routine. That's the problem. So on the left, we have some of the skills that are routine. In other words, they're rule-based. They're repetitive. And on the right-hand side, we have the types of skills that are non-routine and are non-repetitive. And you're even finding this in places such as fast food, in manufacturing, everywhere you go, where people need to be able to be creative and they need to be able to do subjective work without somebody telling them at every minute what to do. So I've given you some information. On the left, you have procedural, rule-based kinds of tasks, such as searching for benefit information, but then being able to explain to somebody how what they found affects their benefits. And that changes for every single person, at least it does in the US. Every single person's benefits are different, based on their enrollee code, based on whether they're diabetic or not. And that's creative. And then if the person's crying, how to handle them. And if their spouse is dying, how do you deal with that? That's not repetitive. That's not repetitive. And you need scenarios, and those are hard to build. And again, that's different work. Build a media script that calls out the most important ahas. That calls for some person. It's not rule-based. It calls for somebody to be creative, like you were talking about, to decide what are the most important ahas. And how do I do this? How do I do this in a certain circumstance versus another circumstance? Traditional e-learning is procedural. And the types of support you and I as instructional designers need to build is not traditionally rule-based. The book that I put down here, if you want to understand the types of information that supports supportive information and the types of things that support this kind of design, is 10 Steps to Complex Learning. Incredibly hard to read. So I've given you the Cliff Notes, written by one of my best friends, Dave Ferguson. He wrote the Cliff Notes, and I told you where to find it. And although I'll tell you what, it is worth having this book. It is worth. He just came out with the second or third version of it. It's on Amazon, and I think I would love to do this. I would love all of us to all join together in a collaborative reading of this book and explain it to each other. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I had the first version, and I wrote a mind map for myself. And then I had to go back to the mind map. And, well, I don't know about you, but the way I made it through my PhD was by writing funny notes to myself, like, this is so hard that I'm going to have to kill somebody. You know, because sometimes your brain just has to explode. That's how hard this was.
Why don't you ask the writers to simplify it for you?
Can you do that for me?
Yeah, we're Dutch too, so.
Yes, please. He is, can you tell me how to say that name?
Jeroen?
No, his last name. Van Morienburg?
Marienboer.
Marienburg?
Yeah.
Marienburg.
Yeah, well,
Marienburg. Okay. I love him. He is my favorite of all times. This is, I think, the smartest person in our field. But here's one of the things he explains. You cannot teach complex skills by breaking them down into their component parts, ever. I already know that, you know that. You have to teach every complex skill as a simplified whole skill. That's what I learned from him a gazillion years ago, because I read some of his earlier articles. No complex skills are made up of simplified parts. A complex skill is taught by simplifying the whole skill as its most simplified form. Okay, that was worth the price of admission. Go ahead. Tell me it was great. No, it wasn't great, huh? Okay. But that's what he says. You can do some part task practice, but the way instructional designers typically design courses is they break them down into component parts. Complex skills are not their component parts. Because when you put them all back together, they are much more than that. Because a person is not putting those things back together. They're doing them all. And that's hard. Yeah, that's what's so hard. That's what's so hard about complex skills, is that they are infinitely harder than their component parts. So you have to find the most simplified form of that complex skill. Okay, so what does this mean? What it means is that instructional design is especially now that most of our skills, most of our jobs are complex. We do have procedural skills in our jobs, but many of our jobs are complex now. And people have to analyze, they have to create, they have to build, and even in our simple jobs, we have those complex skills. So because of that, instructional design has to go further than it's ever gone. And if we don't do this, our organizations will fail. And he said that this morning. So these are the competencies of instructional designers today. And you can get this yourself. They don't give away this whole thing for free, but they give away the bulk of it, a lot of it, and you can download it. And while you may think this only applies to some people, it applies and it's available to a lot. So we talked about this one earlier. And one of the nice things about this competency map is that it tells you which ones are essential and which ones are advanced. But can I just shoot myself? And you guys don't see this. Okay, hold on. Where will it be? Come up here and help me figure this, where this is. Somebody come here and tell me where this thing is. Oh, I see. Hold on. I'm trying, okay. Why can't they see this? Or do I have to, I've just never had the. Hello, where are you? Okay. Does anybody have a PC that can tell me where this is? I have no idea. All right, well, I'm sorry. I'm an idiot.
On that screen, it's not on that screen.
No, it's not on that screen. Why isn't this coming up? Oh, how do I get it off? Thank you. I'm now hot because I'm embarrassed. So I'll tell you about the Rocky Mountain National Forest. I have been there. Have you been there?
No. Been the wrong.
All right, let's just go back to the slides. Forget it. Forget it. Never mind. It's okay. Yeah. I should have known better. So I'm going to recommend that you download the competencies from this site. I was going to show you a few of the competencies. And one of the competencies is that we need to figure out which are instructional solutions and which are not. They have two levels. I'll show this to you because I did manage to put this one on. Essential and advanced. And they consider determining which is an instructional solution and which is not an instructional solution in advanced competency. But you can download that one yourself and take a look at it, and we don't have a lot of time anyway, so that's something we wouldn't have had a lot of time to go through. So here are my conclusions. One is that instructional design is not, and this is my conclusions, and you may or may not have the same conclusions, is that idea is not just designing courses, content, and using authoring tools. We cannot have it be just that anymore. That jobs have been changing, skills are lacking in our countries, and we need to help with the gap. That's our job, is it not? That we are there to help the gap between what people know and what they don't know. And if it's not going to be you and I, who is it going to be? Many IDs, like you and I, need additional skills. There's nothing wrong. People in our organizations need additional skills. There's nothing wrong if you and I need additional skills. I don't have tact skills, so I don't work that well with subject matter experts. I am working on that because it is not okay for me to not have tact skills. So there's nothing wrong with you and I not having every skill we need to have. It is fine for us to learn new things. I need to be a better scenario builder. I'm reasonably good at it. Kathy Moore is fabulous at it, and I would like to learn from her, so I'm going to take courses from her. These are some things that all of us need. Performance analysis. It's one of my very, very best skills, and I teach it. I think we all need to be able to do it and to be able to say, this is not a training problem. You need 2 monitors. It's a lot cheaper than training is because the training won't work, and they'll still need 2 monitors. We need business skills to be able to read the data to figure out what's the problem here. Here's something. We need to be able to manage up. And I actually heard somebody talk about that this morning. We need to be able to manage our supervisors and our CLO and the people we work with so that we can talk intelligently to them about performance. And lastly, I want to tell you that IBSTIPI provides a fabulous evidence-based roadmap for ID competencies. And it's a fabulous place for you to start. I think I don't have any time for questions, but I will be here. And I already know who gets the prize because he got the most cards. So I have a prize for you. And it's not a tiara, even though it obviously looks like it could fit in this box. I will be here today and tomorrow. I'm speaking downstairs in 15 minutes, but I'll be here for a few minutes. I would love to talk to you about this more, especially if you disagree with me or even if you agree. Thank you so much.